Good afternoon, committee. Thanks for being here. Something must be going on today. This is the week for the Ag Committee. So no, we should have this every day. We invite you. It's kind of like church. We invite you here every day at 3:30 because you never know what you might hear and how many different ways I can say Representative Schlingen-Siepen. So I have never, in my 8 years, seen so much clapping to get a legislator's name right. And two in one day. Well, we have a lot to do. I know a lot of folks have traveled and there's busy schedules. So again, thank you for being here. We will be holding 3 hearings today. And so we will open the hearing on House Bill 2397. And with that, we will get a explanation of the bill from Reviser Kyle Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On or after July 1st, 2023, House Bill 2397 would prohibit any person who is owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a foreign adversary to purchase, acquire by grant, device, or descent, or otherwise obtain ownership of any interest in real property located in the state of Kansas. And there was a bit of discussion yesterday about whether the bill included restrictions so that only applied to agricultural land. And the way I read the language, it's pretty all-encompassing. So it would be real property that's land, a house, a condominium, etc. Ownership would be prohibited. And I'm in section 2 of the bill. I'll go back to the definition section here in a bit. This general restriction would not immediately apply to land acquired by 1, the process of law and the collection of debts, 2, a deed in lieu of foreclosure pursuant to a forfeiture of a contract for deed, or 3, any procedure for the enforcement of a lien or a claim on the land, whether created by mortgage or otherwise. However, lands that are acquired by those methods would need to be sold or otherwise disposed of within 2 years of the transfer of the title. A person who inherits real property on or after July 1, 2023, in violation of the Act, would have 12 months to divest such property. The Attorney General would be required to investigate any sale, transfer, or other conveyance of title to real property located in this state if the Attorney General has reason to believe that such transaction is in violation of Section 2. So now jumping back to Section 1, the definitions. The definition of foreign adversary would be defined to mean any government or non-government person determined to be a foreign adversary pursuant to 15 CFR Section 7.4 as in effect on July 1st, 2023. This currently includes China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and the Maduro regime. If the federal list is amended, the Kansas Secretary of Agriculture could adopt rules and regulations to add or remove an entity from the definition. Such a change from the Secretary could result in a definition that is different from the federal government's, but the Secretary would be required to give due consideration to the risks to state and national security and the economic costs and benefits of such action. The definition of person owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a foreign adversary means 1, any person wherever located who acts as an agent, representative, or employee, or any person who acts in any other capacity at the order, request, or under the direction or control of a foreign adversary, or a person whose activities are directly or indirectly supervised, directed, controlled, financed, or subsidized in whole or in majority part by a foreign adversary. So I'll pause just after that first part of the definition and highlight that that could possibly apply to someone who's a citizen of the United States if they are, I guess, essentially working in espionage or in some other capacity for a foreign adversary. And then number two, the second part of the definition, is any person wherever located who is a citizen or resident of a nation state controlled by a foreign adversary, unless such person is a dual citizen of the United States and a citizen of the foreign adversary. Three, the third part of the definition, any corporation, partnership, association, or other organization organized under the laws of a nation state controlled by a foreign state, or four, any corporation, partnership, association, or other organization, whether organized or doing business, that is owned or controlled by a foreign adversary. House Bill 2397 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Questions for Kyle? Representative Shue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Kyle, as written, would this bill prevent any non-naturalized immigrant of one of these countries from buying a house in the state of Kansas?
On and after the effective date of this act, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Fairchild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was that the actual intent of the bill, or was that just ended up being an error in drafting the bill? Because we were told by the speaker yesterday that he thought the original intent of the bill was just to prevent people from foreign countries from buying agricultural land.
Well, I can't speak to the intent, but as I read the current language, I think that it's all-encompassing, but there are ways to restrict it to just apply to ag land.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kyle. You were just handed testimony for the Attorney General, so we will also have that in electronic form after the meeting today. So with that, we will open up the proponents and Attorney General Chris Kobach. Attorney General, thank you for joining us at committee today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here and an honor to be in front of so many great Kansans who are here to hear about something else, but hopefully they'll find this interesting. This is actually one of the top 5 legislative priorities of my office for this year, and you might think, well, why is that on the top 5? Well, actually, the Attorneys General of the United States have been taking a number of actions to corral and restrain CCP-controlled activities in the United States, whether it be lawsuits against TikTok that you may have read about or other things. And this is one other dimension where there is a national security risk, and there are other reasons why this bill is desirable as well. So let me just briefly go into them. I believe something needs to be done this session, and hopefully I'll be able to convey to you why there is some urgency to it. The first one is that the problem is an accelerating one. The amount of foreign-controlled land in the United States doubled in the last 10 years, or in the 10-year period from 2009 to 2019. So it's accelerating. Well, how big is it? Well, the USDA tries to record this and tries to measure it, but they don't have a perfect measure of every land transaction. And so it's generally assumed that their numbers are an underestimate. But according to their numbers, foreign nationals own 35.2 million acres of farmland. So 35.2 million acres, that's roughly the size of Iowa if you put it all together. Percentage-wise, that's 2.7% of agricultural land and growing. But remember, this is an underestimate of what the actual number is. Of those nations, Canada is by far the largest, controls the largest percentage of that 2.7%. China's a much smaller share, but the Chinese share is growing rapidly. And the desire of the Chinese, and specifically the CCP, to control American food supply in the hope of gaining of greater security for their own supply is nothing new and has been well discussed and documented. I think you all probably are aware of how 10 years ago a Chinese-controlled firm called Shuanghui purchased Smithfield Farms, which is the nation's largest pork producer. You probably also have heard in the news of the recent acquisition of ag land near a North Dakota air base, which got a lot of attention. And it, people sometimes were joking a week and a half ago about that balloon traveling across the United States and speculating what their purpose could possibly be. And I piped up, well, I know what they're doing. They're looking for shopping for real estate in Kansas. And, I'm only half joking when I say that, because there is a lot of agriculture in Kansas that could, aside from the control of food supply, could be very valuable. Just think what they could do with land adjacent to the training grounds near Fort Riley, where all of the activity occurs. So I do think it's part in jest, but I do think there's a keen amount of interest in Kansas. Well, why Kansas? In part because our neighboring states have already passed bills like this one. 8 states already have prohibitions on foreign ownership, and those are Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, and then farther away from us, Minnesota, North Dakota, Mississippi, and Hawaii. Most of those laws have been on the books for decades. Some are more effective than others. We've seen an emergence of a loophole in Missouri's law that's been in some articles. I was just having a conversation over the weekend with the Iowa Attorney General, and she has reported that foreign companies have found a loophole by arranging 99-year leases instead of actual land purchases. So I think we need to be thinking about that as we look at amendments to this bill. But the key is, because our neighbors, our agricultural neighbors, excluding Colorado, have already prohibited these types of purchases, then there's more focus on Kansas. The existence of the laws in our neighboring states also, I think, serves to disprove some of the counter arguments. People have just speculated, well, what could be some possible things that could go wrong with this? One was that the laws could be struck down in court. Again, none of the other states' laws have been struck down in court. In fact, most have not even been challenged. Second, some have speculated, well, maybe the countries affected could try to retaliate against Americans trying to purchase land. That has not happened to the residents of any of the 8 states where this is true. So I don't think there is a significant counter-argument to doing this. It's necessary not only for reasons in Kansas, but also for national reasons. I want to just suggest several amendments. It's, of course, your decision what amendments you want, which ones you don't. I think having this bill as is better than nothing, but here's what I would suggest, 5 quick things. First of all, I would say do not limit the bill to foreign adversaries only, which would mean striking sections 1B1 and 1B2 and replacing foreign adversary with foreign national. The reason for this is that the foreign adversaries list changes with time, and the U.S. Secretary of State can simply at will strike a name from the list or add a name to the list, so it's not a stable list. But the second reason is that it goes more to just foreign adversaries. We have a problem, which I'm sure most people in this room are well aware of, and that is the Kansas farmer is aging. The average age nationally is 57.5 years of age. The younger generation is having difficulty moving into the career, standing in the shoes or the boots of their predecessors. And what the surveys indicate that one of the greatest impediments to the younger generation of farmers acquiring land, jumping into the profession, is their inability to acquire land. And I think they should not have to compete against foreign nationals when they're trying to acquire that land. They're already having to compete against large corporations. I don't think it would be too much to ask to take foreign nationals out of the competitive arena. The National Young Farmers Coalition estimates that 2/3 of U.S. farmland will change hands over the next 10 years. So that's my first suggestion. Second suggestion, if you don't want to do that one and you want to keep it limited to foreign adversaries, I would change Secretary of Agriculture to Attorney General. The Secretary of Agriculture is going to be someone focused on agriculture. The listing of foreign adversaries is more of a legal and foreign policy concern. So I think there are lots of people who could do that, but since the Attorney General is in charge with enforcing it, I would move that authority there. I would delete the loopholes in Section 2A2, which were just discussed. Here's an example. You could acquire the land through collection of debt. It wouldn't be too hard to set up a straw transaction where the foreign company or the foreign national sets up some contract with the owner of the land, and it's structured that suddenly the debt is owed, and the land is used to satisfy that debt. There are ways you could use that as a loophole. Fourth change I would suggest is and this goes to Representative Zhu, is that your suggestion or implication that we may not want to stop foreign nationals from purchasing homes and businesses. I agree with you if that is your suggestion. I think an easy way to amend the bill would be by adding a 10-acre threshold. So it would allow foreign nationals to acquire parcels of 10 acres or less, which would be most businesses in most cities. It would certainly encompass most households. So I think you could easily do that. And then the final suggestion is at the bottom of page 2, and that's prohibit the circumvention through 99-year leaseholds or 50-year leaseholds. And I have some language suggested that could be added to the end of section 2A1 so that foreign nationals can't circumvent it the way they've started circumventing the similar law in Iowa. So I hope you all see the same urgency that I do in this. As you can see with these amendments, there are probably more than a dozen different ways to write this bill, and none of the other states' bills are identical. But I do think we need to pass something, and I hope you will give this due consideration. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Attorney General. Questions for the Attorney General? Representative Shue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for being here. I appreciate it. I certainly agree. I think the 10-acre threshold could be one solution to it. I think that's certainly reasonable. I do take, I think, slight exception to the foreign national part of it. I think certainly that there are a certain small percentage of people who reside here from out of the country who could be a security threat. But I think 99% of all what would be termed as foreign nationals under this definition, and what I saw in the Senate bill, are quite simply soon-to-be Americans. And I don't think that, even with the restriction on ag land, I don't think there's a reasonable reason to exclude these soon-to-be Americans from being able to purchase ag land as well. So that's just a comment.
I would just simply respond that, once you are a green card holder, it's only a 5-year period, wait for becoming a U.S. citizen. So I think, that person who intends to become a U.S. citizen can simply acquire the land, after that point. So, but I do see what you're saying.
Representative Haskins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Just a couple questions. Would you help me understand, how do you define real property?
I would say most legal definitions of it would include land, physical land with regardless of whether it has building on it or not.
And so if a business such as a foreign national or a foreign adversary, if we adopt the amendment and they incorporate, a company incorporates, they would be able to purchase 10 acres of land under your amendment, such as a business, is that correct?
I think regardless of whether they incorporate or not.
So as an individual. So would this be better suited for the Department of Commerce or for the Commerce Committee to debate, since it could deal more than just the agricultural land?
Well, I think if you exclude, as I anticipate you have an interest in doing, add that 10-acre threshold and exclude, commercial business transactions, business purchases, and residential purchases, then that goes back to what I think the intent of this bill was to, and should be, to focus on ag land. So assuming you make those amendments, then I think it would be absolutely topical to the Ag Committee.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, General Kobach, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Are there other proponents for House Bill 2397? Seeing none, we'll move on to neutral. And first up, Aaron Popelka. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Aaron Popelka, and typically I'd be standing up here testifying on behalf of the Kansas Livestock Association, and today I am, but I'm also testifying on behalf of the Kansas Farm Bureau. We're delivering this neutral testimony as the two largest agricultural organizations in the state to show you that we speak as one voice on this. We're appearing neutral, but we want to urge extreme caution on this topic. We would urge the legislature to avoid any unnecessary market restrictions on agricultural land, and unnecessary restrictions could immediately draw opposition from our two organizations. I want to state as a general matter, both of our organizations, if you've heard us talk, we are free market organizations. Modern agriculture has to access a tremendous amount of capital. That capital, whether it's equity or debt financing, can come from a variety of different sources. That includes foreign sources. We would say to the committee that if that source comes from a friendly foreign nation, why would we want to put restrictions on that? As Roger McCohen pointed out yesterday, if you look at the percentages, and I include this in my written testimony and a link for you to go to that USDA report, a third of the holdings are Canadian. That is followed by the Netherlands, Italy, United Kingdom, and Germany. Now, the AG mentioned that the holdings have increased greatly, but if you remember back to Roger's presentation from yesterday, most of the holdings are in forest land. The other part of the holdings, especially in Kansas, the growth, are from wind farms. And in fact, a lot of that growth, if you look at the wind farms and the way USDA reports, they actually report leases, not just ownership. And I believe Josh Swati is going to follow me, and he'll probably elaborate on that a little more. The other thing I want to point out, if you look at China, as Roger McCohen pointed out, they are less than 1%. 352,000 acres, according to the latest USDA report. And Roger also pointed I learned something. About half of that is Smithfield and is acquired in one transaction. So when we say things have grown, we have to understand why. The other thing I want to point out, our organizations both believe that this really is a federal issue. If you look at the U.S. Constitution, we all like to talk about it, but one of the things that's known as a Commerce Clause, it says that Congress is empowered to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with the Indian tribes. That's in Section 8. The inverse of that, which has become known as a Dormant Commerce Clause, also prohibits states from discriminating or unduly burdening foreign, international, and interstate commerce, which this bill would apply to. So in that vein, we would suggest the better body to address this issue is Congress. And to that end, Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama, with the support of Roger Marshall from Kansas, have introduced Senate Bill 68. That would place the Secretary of Agriculture on the Committee for Foreign Investments in the United States and add agricultural business and land to that list. We think that is the better approach than states individually taking a look at this. Having said that, we understand from time to time states may feel the need to do something. And in that vein, we did work with the chairman to help craft a very targeted and limited bill. Certainly there may be some technical amendments that we want to discuss, but if additional amendments, and I want to address the 5 that the Attorney General, former Secretary of State, the Attorney General mentioned. If these amendments are adopted, our organizations would immediately become opponents. And I want to elaborate on that a little bit more. First, I want to address Representative Shu's question about homes. This bill was drafted to apply to land in general. And I understand your comment, and I identify with it. The flip side of that is I think you're concerned about homes. Our members are concerned about their agricultural land, which their homes are typically on. So that the point is there, if these are truly foreign adversaries that we're worried about, why does it matter if they own ag land or any land? If they're really foreign adversaries trying to harm the state, why are we going to distinguish between land and my members' land, our members' land? So I'd like to take a minute and go through the 5 amendments the Attorney General mentioned and why we would have an issue. 1, he wanted to remove the foreign adversaries list. He mentioned that, well, it changes from time to time. The way the bill was written, it would not change. It's the list as of July 1st, 2023, and that's for 2 reasons. 1, working with the reviser, we can't have an unlawful, unconstitutional delegation of power. And so the legislature cannot allow the federal government to set it. So we point to a list at a point in time, but then we give the Secretary of Agriculture the ability to adjust as needed, weighing a couple factors. So to that point, we support the Secretary of Agriculture having that ability, not the AG, and for a couple reasons. 1, that USDA report that Roger McCohen mentioned and I mentioned, under that report, each state Secretary of Agriculture receives it. So the Secretary of Agriculture is in a better position than the Attorney General to figure out who owns the land and where it's at based on the report. Second, I think it's good to have someone adjusting the list who's not actually enforcing the list. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of broadening this to other countries beyond just adversaries, again, getting back to complex equity and debt financing. Again, why would we want to discourage allies from investing in our country? And likewise, if we do that, our allies could discourage our citizens from investing in their countries. A number of members of the Livestock Association have holdings in foreign countries. That is not something that we want, a road we want to go down. The other thing the Attorney General mentioned was that Kansas farmers are aging, they shouldn't have to compete. That's a problem, because if this is really about trying to discourage or mitigate the risk of an adversary, but here we're talking about competition, you immediately draw an issue to unconstitutionality under the Dormant Commerce Clause. It's not just if it's facially discriminatory, but if it's discriminatory in fact. So if someone's up here saying that we need to do this because we need to discourage competition, that is likely unconstitutional. The other is the debt exemption. That was put in for a reason. There are many banks. Our farmers and ranchers need to access capital. We do not know the full ownership and control of those banks. And it doesn't say that these foreign banks can hold land indefinitely. It just says if there's a foreclosure, they can own it, but must divest. So we would oppose any attempt to remove that. The other is limiting this to 10 acres. That, again, by doing that, you're creating a discriminatory, in effect, provision that could likely make this unconstitutional. Again, we would oppose any additional subclasses or additions to acres or limitations to acres. And the other is on the leases. Again, I'm not sure. I think there may be another neutral conferee who might address that. But again, when we start creating some of these things, it can become troubling. So with that, Mr. Chairman, again, we're neutral on the bill at this point. There may be some technical amendments that may be needed. But again, any of these substantive amendments or any of the amendments suggested by the AG would turn our organizations from neutral to opponents on this bill. And I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Popelka? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It might be more of a comment than a question, but I think the purpose for distinguishing between agricultural ground and residential ground is just to make sure that we don't punish people who are coming here as immigrants. If somebody comes here from China on a work visa or something like that, then they're going to have a place to live. And if we don't allow them to buy a home, the only option they would have would be to rent a home. And so I just think that there probably needs to be a distinction between those who actually live in China and those who are actually in the United States. I don't know if that would be one way to craft the amendment that maybe you wouldn't have a problem with, but I just think, the purpose of distinguishing between those two different types of ground is just to make sure that we're not punishing people from China who are living in the United States.
The only thing I'd say to that, Mr. Chairman, would be, so if someone immigrated from China and wanted to set up a farming operation, is the intent to discriminate against them as well?
Well, it'd sort of be like the Attorney General said, they could still, after a 5-year period, become a U.S. citizen, and they could still farm the ground. In the meantime, they could rent the ground until they became a citizen.
And on the inverse, I suppose they could do that on home as well. I think the point of having land in there is to point out that if we're really worried about foreign adversaries and not about controlling markets, then it ought to probably apply to everything, if these are truly adversaries we're worried about.
Representative Jacobs on WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. What are your two lobby groups doing to help push Senate Bill 68? Are you opposed to Senate Bill 68? Did you bring a copy of Senate Bill 68 so we can peruse and get about that? And what are your two lobby groups talking about how to protect the assets and the people of the state of Kansas?
So, Mr. Chairman, I know for the Livestock Association ourselves, like I said, Senator Marshall is already on there. We've had some discussions with other members of our House delegation about that concept. In terms of, I'm happy to help facilitate a copy of the bill, but if you go to ks.gov and type in S68, you could pull it up fairly easily. But from our perspective, in fact, I should mention our national affiliate is the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. We just came off of our annual convention, and we adopted formal policy in support of Senator Tuberville's bill, Senate 68.
All right, Representative Jacobs, are you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for your answer. What are some of the suggestions or language that you are suggesting that we can maybe apply to this particular bill that may help facilitate more of a conversation that would help protect Kansans right now? Or how long do you think we should wait until we start protecting Kansans from foreign adversaries?
Mr. Chairman, I think as I pointed out in my testimony, we worked with the chair to craft this bill. And so there may be some technical arrangements or technical amendments that to fix some finer points. But I think substantively, this bill is in a spot where we wouldn't oppose it and would be okay with it should the committee desire to move it forward.
Representative Schlingenstiepen.
You know, I think my problem with all of this is kind of in the language that suggests that somehow we're under siege here, without any definite examples of where and how we're under siege. Just suggestions of how that might be the case. I can see that if a foreign adversary or agent thereof were to purchase land next to a sensitive facility like an Air Force base or other facility, I can see that would be something to be taken very seriously. However, it's very hard to convey to people who aren't down in the weeds to this kind of this kind of thing when you're using the language of threat and being under threat all the time, what the threat is, how significant the threat is, whether this bill actually does anything to address that threat. And, certain politicians have been known to grandstand on topics like this for political gain, and you, sir, referenced that this is also politics. But I think we have to be, as politicians, in the best sense of that word, responsible to not creating a kind of panic atmosphere to which we then craft legislation that in fact does all kinds of collateral damage rather than actually addressing instances which need to be addressed seriously. And that's kind of what I'm worried about here, that we're going down a path at a time when certainly there is a reason to be sensitive to heightened risk, but that we are kind of charging down in a direction where we might actually endanger our foreign assets in other places and things of that nature. I mean, I think your arguments are very solid. They certainly, I find them convincing. I also think we need a mechanism for dealing with specific identifiable threats that are well defined. But I'm not sure if passing this kind of legislation to the extent that we just heard we should, by broadening it, is going to do anything except create all kinds of bias confirmation in our society and put people on edge rather than dealing with concrete problems. That's just me.
Thank you. Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but you said it, so I'm going to ask this carefully, and I really want you to answer this carefully, because I don't think you meant what you said. You said you support this language as written, which currently bans all non-naturalized immigrants from these countries from owning any land in the state.
Well, I think, hopefully, what I said was We don't support the bill. That's why we're neutral. If I came off as being a proponent of the bill, I apologize. Our organizations would say that we would not object to it, but certainly there's some issues that need to be worked out. I think the point I was trying to make was that if there really is a threat from these foreign adversaries that are designated by the State Department, that we ought to make sure that it's applied evenly across the different land types. That assumes that there's a threat.
Okay, I think that's a little bit helpful. I guess I would urge caution about maybe crafting legislation to kind of prove a point, because sometimes in this building that point gets through. So, thank you.
Other questions? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How is someone owning a home in Roland Park more dangerous than someone renting a home in Roland Park if they are a foreign adversary?
That's a good question, and I suppose I'd ask the question, how is the threat different from a foreign adversary owning 160 acres of land in Decatur County, and I believe in the chairman's district, or a one-home lot in Olathe? I suppose it all depends on the level of threat that you perceive. That is, and I'm not here to define that.
I don't perceive a level of threat.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Up next as a neutral is Joshua Svati, Kansas Advanced Power Alliance. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Joshua Swati. I'm here on behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance, and we are here largely because of course, the testimony today and then the informational hearing yesterday, and explaining our position in all of this. First of all, I think it's important for the committee to understand that the relationship between our members, which are the developers, owners, and operators of the wind, solar, and battery storage facilities all across the state of Kansas, our relationship to Kansas landowners, particularly ag landowners, is a very important one to us, and it is a voluntary arrangement. Per 2005, with the industry's support, the Kansas Legislature said that wind and solar developers are not public utilities, and therefore they do not have the power of eminent domain. So anytime we build a wind farm or a solar farm in the state of Kansas, it is entirely because the landowner or landowners, usually in a wind farm, have voluntarily entered into a lease agreement with us. And those leases are typically, they run the duration of the development phase, and then throughout the time period when the wind farm or solar farm would be producing, and then the lease is terminated at the point at which the project is terminated. And this is very similar to an oil and gas lease. And so they can be lengthy in duration, but they are a defined time period, and it is a lease arrangement. And if you're wondering how long some of these can be, in 8 years, our farm will, I guess, celebrate 100 years of Northern Natural Gas having pipelines crossing our farm. So they can be very long time periods in the energy sector, but they are leases. And those are voluntary leases that we enter into with landowners. Now, in respect to understanding the way these are reported on, and I think this is important to talk about because this was referenced yesterday and then it was referenced again today. USDA tracks foreign interest in land per a 1978 federal act called AFIDA, the Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act. Oil and gas interests were excluded in that act, which makes sense because they really don't change the agricultural land that much. Wind, I will not say why wind was excluded in 1978, outside of the fact that it really didn't exist as an industry in 1978. And AFIDA requires any industry that has leases that extend longer than 10 years to begin to report. Well, it was referenced earlier today that there's been an explosion of, it was said, land ownership by foreign interests in the United States. I think it's important for this committee to understand the development of wind in the United States really began in earnest after 2005, and that growth started around 2005. So as you imagine, after that, those 10-year leases begin to show up because foreign-owned entities don't have to report those leases until after they have extended beyond 10 years. So guess what? Around 2016, 2017, you began to see a growth in us reporting largely wind leases around the country, not just in the state of Kansas. So in USDA's tracking under AFIDA, it looks like this growth of foreign interest, but I want to make sure, and I'm going to say this slowly, and I may even repeat myself, they are interests in the form of leases. Interests, not ownership interests, interests in the form of leases per the Agricultural Foreign Investment and Disclosure Act. So we have been reporting those to the Secretary of Agriculture here in the state of Kansas, but that's why you've seen this growth, and it was demonstrated or shown on the maps yesterday, and even mentioned. I mean, they're largely the counties where you would expect them to be, counties with operating wind farms. And again, back to our similarities with the oil and gas industry, when we lease, particularly for a wind farm, we may lease 25,000 acres for a wind farm, all of which get reported. But wind farms end up impacting around 1% of those acreages. So we really don't impact the agricultural land. You can continue, if it's row crop, you can continue row cropping just like you would oil and gas. If it's grassland, you would continue grazing cattle just like you would oil and gas. But we report under AFIDA. So I think it's really important for this committee to understand that the growth that has been seen and has been referenced multiple times, both yesterday and then today in earlier testimony around the country, is largely the wind industry that is reporting. And the other thing that I would give just a brief history on is that the wind and solar industries actually began in the United States in the 1970s, but then for a variety of reasons, that industry did not stay in the United States. It went overseas. And so then as it matured and reshored back into the United States, a lot of those companies were what would be foreign owned. Most of them are European owned companies. And so they came back, they began investing in the United States, they began investing in the state of Kansas. But that's why we have a number of entities that then report under the Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, because they have leased and have a lease interest in wind farms throughout the Midwest and around the country. And so to the previous neutral conferees' comments, I would also say, as this committee deliberates this issue and this particular bill, I would urge extreme caution, because though none of our members are majority owned by any adversaries as currently defined under the bill, as was mentioned before, we are, and this is one of the benefits of being in the United States, we are part of a free and open capitalist market. And so when we finance projects, and these are large projects, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, we go out and seek financing from a variety of sources, and I would urge extreme caution among the members of this committee, because that's one of the hallmarks and reasons our economic system works so well, is because it's capable of moving capital quickly and finding the right balance with capital. And we believe that we have done that well. We also believe that we have engaged well in the state of Kansas and take that voluntary relationship very important. But we also feel like, as was mentioned before, many of our member companies are large multinational global companies that operate around the globe, and they love and see Kansas as a great place to invest and a great place to do business, and we'd want to continue that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swati. Questions? Representative Minix.
Josh, can you give us an idea of the percent of renewable energy that is either owned or leased here within the state of Kansas?
So I don't immediately know, although the professor that spoke yesterday said 1.1 million acres, and I would venture to guess the bulk of that, almost the overwhelming share, maybe 98% of that is likely leased for wind farms. I would, but don't hold me to those numbers, but I would guess that's the case. And they're leased.
Might turn around and ask your partner. She might have.
She might. She'll correct me, I'm sure.
Do you have an answer?
I'm getting a head nod,
Okay.
so I'm in the ballpark.
Okay, good. All right.
All right, thank you.
And I would also say there are instances where they do, where they may purchase property like for the substation or for a laydown yard, but those are minimal acreages, but they would purchase that. Otherwise, it's almost always a lease.
Other questions? Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Swati, would you know how much money these wind farms bring to our Kansas agricultural producers?
That was actually in the testimony that my wife helped draft last night, and she'll be quite upset that I didn't initially mention it. But yeah, I mean, since 2005, our initial wind farm was 2001 in the state. We've had 43 others since then, with another 2 in development. At least $15 billion invested, 20,000 jobs, both direct and indirect, and then just a little under, it's around $49 million annually in payments to landowners, Kansas landowners.
Other questions? Representative Younger?
This wasn't to Mr. Swati, but the previous.
Okay. Mr. Pavelka?
Yes, sir. When I asked to be on the Ag Committee, I didn't expect to be talking about these kinds of things, so I'm sorry for that. But,
amen, brother.
So, you represent the Kansas Livestock Association and the Kansas Farm Bureau. And, I've heard, threats and those kinds of things. So I guess my question is, and again, I heard you say Smithville, the one purchase was Smithville that kind of doubled the land that these foreign adversaries have. Do your clients, do they feel like, Kansas, that we're currently under a security threat, that, I mean, it's imminent that we do something? Is that what these two organizations feel?
I would say, as is in my testimony, we believe the right approach to this issue is at the federal level. And to that end, we support Senate Bill 68 that Senator Tuberville's introduced to add the Secretary of Agriculture to that Foreign Investment Review Board and add ag land and businesses to that review. That way, we're not prohibiting equity financing from coming to the market, but we're scrutinizing these to determine, is there a risk? And if there is, then we can do something about it. So that's the way we believe would be the right approach.
And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but really you feel like there needs to be further study to see if we're currently under threat.
I would say this, if it were up to us, we would just as soon the state not do anything and allow Congress to step in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Josh. Anyone else here to testify neutral? Seeing none, you will find 2 written that are opposed. Melissa Styler from the Cross Border Network and Ashley Garr of Kansas Land Title Association. Anyone else as an opponent to this bill? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on House Bill 2397. Up next, House Bill 2331, and we will call on Kyle once again to give an explanation of this bill.
All right, a little bit of a change of pace here. House Bill 2331 would designate Lehigh Portland State Park in Allen County. Under current law, the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks has exclusive administrative control over state parks and has the power to operate and regulate the use of state parks. House Bill 2331 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. Any preliminary questions?
Any questions for Kyle? Okay, very good. Okay, Kyle, thank you. was the laugh because finally we're getting to this. In the interest of time, other than our first presenter, we will limit testimony to 2 minutes, give or take. My vice chair will be the timer for that, Representative Mosier. So, but first we will call on. The fiscal note is not complete yet on this, so that's why we don't have one for you. So up first, we'll call on Linda Lanterman with Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. Thank you for your patience and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and members of this committee. Early last of our season, about June, we were approached by Thrive Allen County on behalf of Iola Industries to look at a piece of property that they wanted to donate and designate as a state park and have us run it at that. Of course, we knew about Allen County because they were named the Trail Town of the Year in 2017, and Prairie Spirit Trail goes right through there. So I sent a team to go look at the property. It has 13 miles of trails on it. It's a wooded area. I kind of liken it to Cross Timbers State Park. And then it has a quarry, a lake, that's crystal clear. It's beautiful as you get up on the bluff to look down on the lake. And I liken that to historic Lake Scott State Park, about the same size. However, Lehigh's a little bit larger. When we went out there and looked at it, our team looked at infrastructure, we looked at utilities in the area, what it had been used for all the past years that it's been under Iola Industries, and it has been used for recreation. And I guess what I would say to you today about Kansas State Parks and why would we do that? Number one, it would be under our jurisdiction so where we can use a fee structure to charge fees to use that facility. Number two, in 2021, Kansas State Parks contracted with Wichita State University's Center for Business Development and did an economic impact study for Kansas. Our state parks came to show $287 million impact to the state of Kansas economy. I think that's pretty good on our investment for state parks. In addition to that, we do a plan for outdoor recreation every 5 years, which is required for our federal Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. The top two priorities in that study that was done in 2020 was one, expanding community systems in the community trails, and number two, connecting regional trails. This property connects communities to trails, and it also connects the Southwind Trail, the Prairie Spirit Trail to the Flint Hills Trail that was named a state park in 2018. So those are the top two. When we did surveys, we sent over 200,000 surveys out for that study. And that's what they wanted us to focus on. And that's what our federal grants go for today is trail use in this state. Two weeks ago, the Trail Day was in the Capitol. We had people come in from all over, and it was said during that Capitol Day that Kansas is known for its trails across the nation. What I wanted to, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I want to tell you about our state park economic impact. Not only did they do an economic impact, that the study also identified non-market values for businesses within Kansas. When asked about their dependency on state parks as a source of their revenue, more than half of the respondents indicated they were between moderately to very important. In addition to that, an overwhelming number of businesses and firms indicated that if state parks closed, 45% indicated they would close, downsize, or relocate. I think this is a good prospect for Kansas State Parks. It's a beautiful area. It's 350 acres. It's got a 138-acre lake that's absolutely stunning if you haven't seen it. And we'll put a plan together on how it can be used, but it has been used for recreation in the past, so it's not uncommon for us. We have a great team that can operate this and have a vision for it. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Lanterman? Representative Blex.
Thank you, young lady, for being here. Good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you.
And I'm looking at a map for your information. Connection to the Prairie Spirit existing trail, how far is that? Is that through some residentials? Do we have a defined trail that would be a connection there, or just where are we at on that?
They do have a connection to the Prairie Spirit from here. You'll see the Southwind Corridor. I'll let.
So the connection to the Prairie Spirit takes from the Lehigh Trail, goes west. On what we call the Connector Trail. The Connector Trail then hits Southwind. The Southwind then goes north onto the Prairie Spirit Trail.
Name for the record,
Sorry,
please.
Melissa Regier.
Sorry. and then of course our Prairie Spirit hits the Flint Hills Trail.
Is that connection going to be through some current residential streets, or will it be off of the residential streets?
Well, that's already there. So these trails are the trails that they have already. There's already a connector with the south in those trails. Those are already there and developed.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
Other questions? Yes. Oh, Representative Gardner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you clarify for the committee, the information that we were given? There was a letter here dated August 26th of 22 addressed to the governor and to the secretary, and it laid out the terms and conditions of the gift that would be coming, and it lays out those conditions here. There were 6 of them. And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that.
Okay.
First of all, is this a binding contract that we will have to abide by if we accept this gift? Most specifically, it states that the property open as Lake Lehigh State Park no later than January 1 of 24. It also excludes the water rights to Elm Creek, and I wondered if you could comment on that, why the water rights would be excluded. And it also deals with an oil well and some natural gas easements there. Could you address the whole topic of change of ownership here from a private entity to the state and how that will work?
Okay, I'll do my best on if I can go back to your questions. So it's not uncommon for us to have property that has an oil properties or gas properties in it. That's not uncommon for a state park or the state of Kansas to have that in our bailiwick that we deal with. The water rights, keep in mind, we have several reservoirs that water rights belong to communities. That's also not uncommon. It's for their use of water. So several of our reservoirs, we already deal with that. Help me with some of your other questions. Oh, to get it started by 2024. So really, if you look at this property, if we don't do a thing to it today, it's like Kaw River State Park. It's a trail system. There's trails. There's 13 miles of trails already in here. There's a boat ramp, but Kaw River's the same. And so it's a smaller unit, but we have people that are along the Flint or the Prairie Spirit Trail now. So do I think we can open it up? I do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Representative Schlingensieben?
There was a time when trail systems were considered a foreign adversary.
We're getting some of us might be. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I want to just say that, in an era in which people are working more and more remotely, and where people can choose to work in any kind of profession from any place, the idea that thoughts are being given to how we can articulate, advertise, design our counties to attract professionals to our communities or to retain professionals in our communities, especially now where it's so hard to find people in the medical field to serve in rural communities, to find teachers and so forth. Creating a park like this is a major of major economic significance. And I can say, since you referenced Kansas State Park, I believe, one of my favorite places to jog, run, and make a fool of myself, it adds true joy to one's life. And I think that all of these trail systems that are being developed, moreover, have incredible economic impacts on the communities through which they go. I know because I spend money in those communities, and I probably would have never set eyes on many of them had it not been for those trail systems. And it's absolutely amazing, and I'm thrilled to hear about this project in this committee. I really am. Thank you.
Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions. So the basic activities at this park will include fishing, swimming, camping, biking, hiking?
Those are what we do now, of course. But I think a true master plan would, the quarry is a great spot for maybe scuba diving, paddle boarding, canoeing. We can put a canoe route in there that we can get RTP funds, was recreation trail funds. We have the same thing at Cross Timber State Park. There's many things that when I stood up there and looked at that property, my mind went 100 miles an hour thinking, oh my gosh, this would be beautiful. Those are normal things that we do in our state parks. I do think they're camping, yurts, something like that in that facility for sure.
Okay, thank you. A couple more, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
In this report, there were a couple of endangered species that might be in or near the area. Could you elaborate on what might happen if they are indeed found in that park?
Of course, we have those right now at Historic Lake Scott. We have the spotted beetle. Just their presence doesn't make sure that isn't that we can't have something there. We have a great environmental services team. They'll make sure that we don't develop on anything that has to do with that those two endangered species for sure.
Okay, and then my last question: is there a cost involved with the development or the phases of development, because it's not all going to happen at one time?
So what we thought we would do, and that's a great question, the urgency is so we can apply for the Spark funding. And those have to be spent within a couple years once we get it. That is the urgency to go ahead and start this. And we want to be able to get as much done as we can, which would include something maybe like a visitor center, access to the area, better boat ramps, more trails. So that would be the urgency and the cost. I would apply for, on the Spark funding, $5 to $7 million. If we don't get that funds, I would do just like what we're doing in our Kansas State Parks today. I would apply for federal funds through Land and Water Conservation Fund for the Rec Trails funding, which is 80-20. And I would take whatever funds we have, which we allocate out, and we would develop in phases, like you said.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for a second time. To the former representative's question, it could be that T&E species could be a flight of lesser prairie chickens coming east looking for water. I guess my question is, it may be better addressed to another conferee, but what happens after January the 1st of 2024 if we decide not to do that? Then what? What's going to be the status? It looks like this is kind of a drop-dead date. Is that?
I understood it as a drop-dead date.
Okay. Thank you.
A couple other things right quick. How many of the state parks are right next to an old industrial site?
We don't have too many close to it in an old industrial site, but we have some that are close to urban areas. And when you're close to urban areas, there's other things around them that you may not want to have to deal with every day. But El Dorado State Park's right in an urban area. Clinton State Park's in an urban area. Turtle Creek State Park isn't in an urban area.
Okay.
So,
well, yeah, okay. My point's not necessarily an urban area. My point is an industrial site, and those could have chemicals. They could have some residues left over, spilled fuel over time. Has there ever been any question as far as, stuff in the water or, just looking at some of those things?
so far that has not been identified. Keep in mind, it has not been used since 1970 as an industrial area. So it's been used as a recreation area. Those will be certainly something that we look at as we get the money, if we get the money for the grant to move forward with any development.
Okay, before we start with everybody else who's been waiting, as far as you know, is there anybody opposed to this?
I don't know of anybody.
I'm just, I haven't seen anything, and usually when you do anything, it's hard to get everybody to agree, so. And I know there's about 4 more people left in Iola that didn't come up today, so, all right.
Thank you.
All right, are they? Reinforcements? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, appreciate everybody's patience. We will do our best to get out in committee. I apologize. This is probably the only time we'll go maybe a little bit late, but these are important things. So we'll now start a process, and we'll call on everybody. But first up will be Lisa Regier from Thrive Allen County.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Rajas and committee members. And I'm wondering if I can steal like 1 minute from every person behind me. Could I say just a couple minutes more as I'm getting us started? I crossed a lot off my list. Thank you all so much for allowing us to testify here today in support of House Bill 2331, the creation of Lehigh Portland State Park. You can see I'm beaming about it. My name is Lisa Regier, and I'm the president and CEO of Thrive Allen County, as well as an Iola Industries board member. As the president and CEO of Thrive Allen County, I oversee economic development work within Allen County. And as an Iola Industries board member, I was one of 15 who unanimously voted to donate our Lehigh Portland property to the state of Kansas with the intent of it becoming a state park. Thrive is a health, wellness, and economic development organization. We see health as the total package: physical, social, emotional, and fiscal well-being. We work to intertwine all these parts together to create a more viable and flourishing community. In 2014, when I began my journey with Thrive, we were just beginning to create what is now known as the Lehigh Portland Trail System. Cedars were cut down, blazing the paths for the screenings to be laid in another 2 years. We were still figuring out where the single track was going to be crisscrossing the terrain, and it is thanks to our dedicated volunteers, many of whom are in the room with us now, spending countless hours, that Lehigh Portland is what it is today. We had a vision that these trails would become an economic driver as well as a recreation spot for our community members and visitors, and that vision very quickly became reality. One of the first things we learned with Lehigh was that it was to become our #1 recruitment tool to entice people to move to Allen County. Even before the trails were completed, we were taking recruits for various job openings in our community to Lehigh to show them what was to come. The first dentist I successfully assisted in recruiting was in February of 2015. He and his family of 5 chose to move to Allen County over other communities, in large part due to Lehigh Portland. And to this day, his wife still states that Lehigh has saved her life by allowing her to become healthier. One of my favorite things is to take our recruits out to Lehigh, to start at the East Trailhead, walk them to the Vista, where they overlook the entire lake. When you walk into that view, it's breathtaking, and like nothing you were expecting to see in Southeast Kansas. And I love waiting for those reactions, the awe, the love, the exclamations of wonder. And the interesting thing is, those feelings, they don't go away over time. Every time you go out there, it's the same thing. One of the unique opportunities with Lehigh is the collaboration Thrive Allen County will have with KDWP. Thrive is a very well-established grant-writing organization. In the past 2 years alone, we've brought more than $7 million into local government and nonprofit entities in Allen County. This is not funding that came to Thrive, but instead funding that was written for the express intent of other entities in our community. As Lehigh is currently privately owned, there are very few grant opportunities for the area. But when it becomes publicly owned, that all changes. And Thrive is excited to partner with KDWP to ensure Lehigh has abundant resources for its growth and sustainability. Thrive also currently has 2 team members whose sole jobs are bikes and trails. Over the past couple of years, their work has been very specific to Lehigh. We plan to continue to work with KDWP as long as they'd like our assistance. Our team already has a cadre of volunteers, and those volunteers have made Lehigh into what it is today, and they want to continue to partner with KDWP to ensure its growth and sustainability in the future. More than anything, this gift given by Iola Industries to the state is about preserving our rural way of life. Rural communities in Kansas are on the decline. On average, we're losing population and businesses. Allen County is no exception, but we are actively working to change this. In 2017, Allen County won the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Culture of Health Prize. To this day, we are still the only Kansas community to receive this honor, and it wasn't because we're the healthiest community, far from it, but because we're scrappy and we're resourceful, and we collaborate to ensure we create opportunities and knock down barriers. The gift of Lehigh Portland to create a state park is one of those opportunities. We want to be on the forefront yet again in finding ways to move our small rural community forward that might then inspire other rural communities to do the same. In a day and age where many people, as stated, can work remotely, how do rural communities become a place where workers want to live? How do we ensure awe-inspiring environments like Lehigh are open and available to the public for generations to come? More than anything, what I want to share today is a love letter. It is Valentine's week after all. Iola Industries has written a love letter to the state of Kansas. Bearing within it, and excuse me because I might get a little emotional here, bearing within it a donation of our greatest asset, our most beloved possession. And it's not being gifted because it makes fiscal sense for the organization to do so, but because it is an act of love for our state, for our community, love for preserving our rural way of life, love for environments we strive to conserve, and love for our future generations like my niece who will speak to you in a minute. People we've not even met yet, people who aren't even born yet, who will benefit from this gift for generations to come. I truly believe, as I think you can tell, that Lehigh Portland will be one of the top assets in the state of Kansas's wildlife and parks portfolio, holding boundless opportunities for exploration, recreation, adventure, education, and economic growth. It also ensures future generations know we are invested in Kansas. We are invested in their future, and we are doing everything we can to preserve our most valuable assets in the hopes they will want to make their future here. I am proud to be here today to share even just a snippet of the good that has come from Lehigh Portland over the years. Knowing that this opportunity to create Kansas's next state park is such a great step forward in Lehigh Portland's journey and our state's history. And I really do thank you for the time you've given us and in meeting with so many of you over the past couple of weeks. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. I think in matter of time, we'll wait till the end for
Perfect.
everybody. And so we can get everybody in. Also, there is a fiscal note that was sent, so you should have it in your email. So if you want to check that out, there is a bit to that, and we can discuss that maybe a later time. So up next, John McCrae from Iola Industries.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. How do you follow that? I'm going to try not to cry. But what I do want to get across to you is what Iola Industries is and what our relationship is with Thrive Allen County. Iola Industries was founded in 1955. It's governed by a 15-member board, all volunteer. In 1971, we purchased the Lehigh Portland cement plant and several hundred acres of ground when they closed the plant down. It was used from about 1902 to 1971 as a quarry. They dredged stone out of it. There is an oil well there. When we were talking with you a little bit earlier, that's a gift also. You guys can do with it what you want. It's never been a big revenue source for us. And I think there's a gas well there. And it's so minimal that the president doesn't even know if we've ever gotten any royalties off of it. But we had, since the 70s, leased the quarry, the lake, to the Iowa Elks Club for $1 a year. And it just, was a matter of convenience for us and for them. And as the Thrive developed the trails, it's incredible the number of people that have come to our community to take advantage of it.
30 seconds. 30 seconds, please.
Okay. And that's why our board voted unanimously to participate in this project. Those limitations that you're talking about, if you make it into a state park, I think the only limitation with the water is that the city of Iowa has a right to use it in an emergency, and I'm sure the state could work with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just in order of time, to keep you all, so you're not back so late and the committee to stay so late. So thank you. Vice Chair Bozier will give you the signal at that 30 seconds. So I know 2 minutes is quick. So up next to John Masterson from Iowa Industries.
Great. Thank you very much, John Masterson. I've been a member of Iowa Industries for about 30 years, and this is a huge deal. We feel like for economic development of our area, we think that business it'll do the people that come to fish and will buy groceries and gas and those kind of things. We think its recreational value will make it attractive to businesses that might be going to locate, or to our existing industries and their employees. And most importantly, we think it'll help to attract new employees to our businesses, which I know that you probably haven't heard this from other places, but we desperately need in our industries and around Allen County. I was the president at Allen Community College for 30 years, and those students always come to my mind. Our students, the 300 and some, live on campus. They could ride bicycles, which we have a bike share program, 2 blocks, and get on the Prairie Trail, cut across over to the Lehigh-Portland Trail, and go directly to the lake to picnic, swim, recreate, and I think it's a beautiful attraction to recruit and keep students happy and healthy. People my age, personally, I have dedicated myself to some physical activity after retirement. I love our trails. This would make it even more attractive. Just one of the things I might add, because no one had been able to talk about this, is there anybody opposed to it? The only concerns that I have heard are from Elks members who have had this facility for many, many years. But I would tell you that there are 4 Elks members on Iowa Industries board, and the board vote was, as John said, unanimous. So thank you so much for listening to us and for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. Up next, are you Steve or Matt?
I am Matt.
Okay.
Matt Rader. I'm the city administrator in the city of Iola. On the line of speakers, it was either going to be Steve French, who was the mayor, or myself. Mayor French was unable to attend tonight. I will be brief. At the city council meeting on Monday night, there was a proclamation approved by the governing body, signed by the mayor, signed by myself. It's in your packet of written testimony. I do want to highlight a couple items: the increasing recreation opportunities for boating, fishing, and swimming, and then also the trail system, as has been mentioned, for physical activities for walkers, runners, and bicyclists. I'm an avid runner, and I've put a lot of miles on the trails. If you are an avid runner, I suggest you go down there. It is very great on the knees, and if you run, you know what I mean. Also, there's potential, once this develops, for this potential state park to become an economic hub in southeast Kansas, and that will be within the city limits of Iola. And selfishly, we are happy to spend any sales tax dollars that will be given there. And thank you.
Very good. Thank you. David Lee from the Allen County Commission. Welcome to
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is David Lee. I am I'm a county commissioner. I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody else has said, other than that we, the commissioners, support House Bill 2331. We think it will be good for the county. We think it'll be good for the region. You also have a letter of support from us in the packet wherever it is. So pending your questions, thank you.
And again, committee, there's well over 100 letters of support, is that right? Written proponents, as well as those that are here, so they're in a series of emails. So up next to Jeff Carroll from the Auto Bike Shop.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Carroll. I'm the owner of Ottawa Bike and Trail, and we're right at the intersection of the Flint Hills Trail and the Prairie Spirit Trail state parks. And we actually opened in 2018, the same year that the Flint Hills Trail became a state park. So I'm going to just touch a little bit on some of the economic benefits that we've seen there, and also how it really extends to the entire trail system that's connected to the proposed state park. So we really opened our business because we saw the investments that the state and the county and the city were making and all the excitement around the trails, and we decided to put our business there. And that was 4 years ago, and since that time we've seen a number of businesses crop up along the trails, both in Ottawa and both ends of the trails and all along the trails. Coffee shops, 2 breweries, multiple Airbnbs. So the economic benefits, we're seeing that. We just actually started a group at Trail Days 2 weeks ago called Trail Friendly Business Coalition, and we already have 18 members. So there's a lot of excitement from small businesses, especially along the trails, that benefit from the trail users. For us, we see visitors come all over. In the last 4 years, we've seen an exponential growth in visitors to the trails just because of all of this development. You can go in behind our shop at any weekend day and see license plates from all over, not just the state of Kansas, but the surrounding states. We even had a family of 6 come all the way from New York City and spend multiple days on our trails last summer. We rented bikes to them and just had a great time getting to know them. But we see people from all over just flocking. And to me, the biggest reason to support this trail project is really the connection that it will bring. It'll have impacts all the way down the trails. We're 52 miles away from the Portland project, but we see the impact of things like that along the trail. So I think it'll have a dramatic impact to the overall trail system and continue to help see all those benefits.
Thank you. Judy Hayner, correct?
That's good.
All right. Welcome to committee.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much for letting me come and talk about trails. I'm Jody Hayner, the President and CEO of the Healthy Bourbon County Action Team in Fort Scott, Kansas. I love talking about our mission. Our vision is to increase access to physical activity, healthy food, tobacco cessation, enhance quality of life, and encourage economic growth. So when Lissa called and told me that this was coming up to be presented to you all, I squealed all over the phone. I was so excited. We see so many siloed communities that are trying to do their own thing throughout the region. And here recently, we were able to put together a regional bike route plan funded by Sunflower Foundation over there. And we just had our unveiling last year. And we had a ribbon cutting in Pittsburgh and in Iola that were done at the same time. And we had a big party in Fort Scott where we all met together and we celebrated this trail, this route that connected all of us. So it's about connections. It's about connecting to jobs, to food, to anything, to the communities. And so we're really excited about this project itself because of the economic impact that it makes on the entire region.
Thank you. Up next, Brock Godinez.
Yeah.
Good, very good.
Thank you, Mr. A little nervous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But yes, my name is Brock Godinez. I'm a senior at Chanute High School, and making Lehigh Portland a state park would be extremely beneficial, not only for Iola, but also for the surrounding counties and cities such as Chanute, my hometown. One of the many benefits, for example, in Chanute, we have a couple of decent trails, and the same goes for the Southeast Kansas region. I'm a cross-country runner, so I'm kind of a connoisseur on trails. But when I've gone over to the Iola trails, there's no comparison. The trails seem to go on forever, and the views are spectacular. Same goes for the lake. It's absolutely beautiful. I think it's probably the most beautiful lake in the Southeast Kansas region. As I said before, I'm a cross-country runner. I've been on the Chinook cross-country team for 4 years. And once or twice a month, our coach would take us down to the Iola trails. And we would be down there for about 2 hours, and we would enjoy every single bit of it. And we would afterwards go out to breakfast, and this is about 6 a.m. and we would have a nice big breakfast, and sometimes get ice cream. So,
And running.
I definitely think that with state funding and with state guidance, that the park could definitely be elevated to an even better place that it already is. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Sorry to have you wait so long, but you did fine. Up next to Daryl Pulliam from Pittsburgh State.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So I'm going to speak from the heart. I'm a cycling advocate. I've been riding bicycles for 54 years of my life. And what I've done is I've ridden bikes in over 40 states around the country. And what I can say is on an everyday occurrence, I live in Pittsburgh, Kansas, work for Pittsburgh State. I travel down to Arkansas all the time and use the trail systems down there. In Bentonville, I go over to the Katy Trail over in Missouri, and I travel across the country to Atlanta regularly and ride there. What I do now is I get on my bicycle and I ride over here to Iola. Well, not over here, but down there to Iola. And I do that because it's available to us. I like riding, adventure style riding. And the trail access that we have there is really incredibly fantastic, quite honestly. It's so easy to be able to ride there, spend the night, get back on my bike, ride up to where Jeff's at up in Ottawa, spend the night, and then ride back to Pittsburgh. And so for us having that kind of opportunity right here in Southeast Kansas, the word I typically use is bicycle economics. And what that really translates to is the people that I ride with have a fairly good discretionable level of income, and they can go anywhere and ride if they want. But we have people that come from Arkansas now, and they come up to Kansas, and we have people that come from Missouri and Oklahoma, and I meet them right here in Iowa, Kansas, and we value that trail system. So I'm in full support of the Lehigh Portland Trail Park, and hope that you will all move forward with that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Now, you all been waiting here, but there's been somebody online that has been waiting. So I believe he's still there. So up next is Brett Greenwood. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. There's already been a lot of positive comments made, and just from what I was hearing, I'm sure the committee is aware of the benefits that parks and trails bring to the lives of people, and certainly one of the committee members is experiencing it personally from what he shared. I'm coming from way out west in a little town called Plainville, about 1,500. And when I came out here about 8 years ago, the first thing I noticed was the lack of access to trails. I had been cycling regularly from the Topeka area and the Linden area. And I remember when I saw what was starting at the Lehigh Portland and was excited about it, optimistic for what could come out of it. And so I just wanted to come on today and just share my excitement, my enthusiasm for the opportunity that this presents for the state. Others have spoken on just the draw that the park can be. I want to come back to a comment that the chairman made about the kind of an old industrial area. That's part of the uniqueness of this park and of the trail system and what makes it a draw. It's not a detriment. It's a unique blend of beauty, and that uniqueness is what we'll be adding to the state park system. And so I just want to lend my support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is the one we've been waiting for all day. So, Mariah Springer. So, welcome. It's all fine.
There you go. Go ahead.
Is that right? Is it Mariah?
Moira.
Moira. Thanks, Grandpa. You got it right. Okay. Well, you've been very patient and understanding, and you learned a valuable lesson today. Government does not move as fast as what some would like it to. Welcome to committee.
Hello. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Moira Springer, and I am 10 years old and live in Allen County. I am here today because I am very excited about the possible creation of Lehigh Portland State Park. My parents moved back to Iola from Oklahoma in 2013 when I was 1. They wanted to move back home because they saw a lot of great things happening in our community. One of these things was trails, allowing us places to explore, walk, bike, and play. In 2014, my dad and older brother started to help build the Lehigh Portland trails with many other volunteers. I have seen this place when there were no trails there and have watched it grow into the beautiful area it is today. I have been able to explore John Brown's cave all the way through with my friends. Sometimes you can't because the water gets too high. So it's really cool that I've been able to explore it all the way through. I've seen fossils because 100 million years ago, Kansas was underwater, and the fossils are from that time. There's so much to explore at Lehigh. I hope you create Lehigh Portland State Park. I have made many great memories there, and if you make it a state park, kids from all over the state and surrounding states can come see how beautiful Southeast Kansas is. Thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. And just so you know, you can go on YouTube and you'll be able to watch it because all this is also archived on the Kansas Legislature YouTube page under the Kansas House Ag Committee. So you can see yourself. Very good. Okay, to wrap up this portion, John Leahy with Thrive Allen County.
Thank you very much. I have the unfortunate job of following her. As the chairman said, my name is John Leahy. I'm the Director of Trails for Thrive Allen County, a board member of the Grassland Heritage Foundation, and I've been the steward of the Lehigh Portland Trails for the last year and a half. I'm a transplant here to Kansas, and when I got here, I got the nicest possible version of the, "You're not from around here, are you?" In 2018, my fiance and I moved from up north, where I'm originally from, to be closer to her family and to fulfill her lifelong dream of being a teacher. And most importantly, to get away from city life and back to the slower pace of life that rural living allows. In the time since I've moved, I've been lucky enough to shed my desk job and through my current job, connect with the community and the land in ways that I never expected. So I want to leave you with a couple of things here today. In my eyes, there are 3 really unique aspects of the Lehigh that make it particularly critical to preserve. And some other people stole some of my thunder on these points, so I'll try and be brief here. Firstly, the Lehigh Portland is a living museum. That industrial past is so important. It's been the beating heart of Iola and Allen County and continues to be in its current state. Secondly, Lehigh is a tapestry of ecosystems. Linda did a fabulous job at explaining some of those to you, and I would invite you all to visit because it is truly wonderful. The last point I would like to make, and the one that I want to spend a little bit more time on, is that this land has been carefully curated and fought for by a different breed of volunteer, conservationists. It's with these volunteers that I've found my particular passion. Aldo Leopold is a personal hero of mine, and he devised a concept of land ethic, the idea that people and land are inherently intertwined and care for one another. And I know that's not just him saying that. People have been saying it for thousands of years. Nowhere could that philosophy be more evident than in the volunteers' work. I have spent hundreds of hours managing invasive species, collecting seeds from wildflowers, and working on habitat improvement, but it pales in comparison to the thousands of hours that our volunteers have put into the sustainability of Lehigh. In fact, our volunteers' willingness to pass on their knowledge is perhaps the most valuable gift that Lehigh and this community have to offer. These volunteers educating the next generation, like Moira and Brock here today, I know it's of the utmost importance to give them the tools to chart their own course. So if you take away one impression from today. I hope it's the memories of Lehigh, like crackling grass fires creeping into russet fields, watching flocks of waterfowl seek refuge from a storm on our lake, and discovering an explosion of sunflowers protruding from a rocky glade will continue to enrich the lives of all who precede us and experience them. There's so much more to see than meets the eye at Lehigh, Portland. This land is the very soul of our community, and it heals the soul of all those who visit it. It has certainly healed me, and it's made me proud to call myself a Kansan. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me. Thank you all for your patience. Is there anyone else want to testify as a proponent? As we said, there are well over 100 letters either of support or of testimony that you have in email form. Anyone wanting to testify as an opposition of House Bill 2331? Seeing none, anyone wish to testify neutral on House Bill 2331? Seeing none, we will close the hearing now on House Bill 2331. Those from Iola, if you would like to leave, you can. If not, you can stick around. But so we will. You know what? I apologize. I'm going to retract that. We're not going to close the hearing. I'm going to give just a couple minutes because we did not get to ask anybody any questions. I know the hour's late, but does anybody have any questions? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Linda Latterman may be the one to answer that. And I'm assuming that Iola Industries been paying property tax, and the process of Kansas Wildlife and Parks, they normally make that same payment. Is that going to continue to be paid?
Thank you, Representative. That's a good question. We did receive a copy of what they've been paying, and it's not uncommon for us to pay that if that's what we need to do with this property.
You couldn't talk to the county commissioner that's 100% for it to rebate those?
I think the value we're going to put in there exceeds that, but it's not very much money.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Thank you. Thank you, committee, for your indulgence. And now we will close the hearing on the House Bill 2331. So travel safely if you want to go now, and then we'll pause just a minute or so before we'll start our final hearing of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Yes. Okay. No. We will wait just a moment for Representative Miller to come back. He needed a quick comfort break. As probably most of us do.
I don't think his feelings will be hurt.
Okay, then we will go on. Okay, we will continue now with House Bill 2091 hearing, and with an explanation, Kyle, once again.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard two important bills so far. This third one is also important, so I want you guys to pretend like this is your 9 o'clock committee and this is the first thing you've heard all day. I'm going to start with some background on the federal law that has kind of facilitated the situation for this bill. So on August 16, 2022, the federal government's Inflation Reduction Act became effective. One section of the act created the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and the funds would be appropriated as follows. One, $7 billion to states, municipalities, tribal governments, and eligible nonprofits to enable low-income and disadvantaged communities to deploy or benefit from zero-emission technologies and to carry out other greenhouse gas emission reduction activities. Two, $11.97 billion to eligible nonprofits to provide funding and technical assistance to establish new or support existing public, quasi-public, not-for-profit, or nonprofit entities that provide financial assistance to qualified projects. And then three, $8 billion to eligible nonprofits for the purposes of providing financial assistance and technical assistance in low-income and disadvantaged communities, and then for $30 million for administrative costs. And then this next part's also pretty important. Such monies will remain available until September 30th, 2024, and will be distributed to eligible recipients through competitive grants. Qualified projects that would receive funding would include any project, activity, or technology that, one, reduces or avoids greenhouse gas emissions or other forms of air pollution in partnership with and by leveraging investment from the private sector, or two, assists communities in the efforts of those communities to reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions and other forms of air pollution. And the federal bill defines zero emission technology to mean any technology that produces zero emissions of certain air pollutants and any greenhouse gas. All right, so now we're ready to turn our attention to the actual House Bill 2091. It would require the Secretary of Agriculture to create a nonprofit organization called the Kansas Sustainable Agriculture Fund that qualifies as an eligible nonprofit under the federal law. The Secretary would additionally be required to establish on or before June 1, 2023, a division of sustainable agriculture to distribute grants, loans, bond guarantees, and other financial and technical assistance to sustainable agriculture districts using funds from the Federal Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The funds distributed to sustainable agriculture districts would have to be used for the construction and commissioning of renewable natural gas plants or sustainable ammonia or urea plants, or a combination of both. Sustainable agriculture districts would be defined as improvement districts incorporated under KSA 1927-53. Improvement districts typically plan and construct or purchase public works and improvements necessary for the public health, recreation, convenience, or welfare within the limits of the improvement district. House Bill 2091 would become effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for Kyle, Representative Fairchild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know why it was necessary to establish a brand new division within the Department of Agriculture instead of just having this be done through an already existing division?
I don't have a direct response to that. A few months ago, I reached out to someone at KDHE. I was curious if there might be a designated agency to generally kind of try and bring down these funds, and they said the decision hadn't been made yet. And I don't know, in the meantime, if the governor's decided on that issue. But as to your particular question, I'll defer to our subsequent conferees.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Kyle. And again, with the late hour that we are, I would ask that testimony can stay around the 5-minute mark. We'll be a little flexible, but we do have testimony. You do have an email with the testimonies in there. So up first, we'll have Dr. Kassad come back. He was here earlier this week. So if you would welcome back to committee and start your testimony.
foresighted that you had me come in for the briefing on Tuesday. Between then and now, the EPA has issued its guidance on the structure of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is central to the topic, and I want to spend most of my time on that. I will briefly review the main points. First, under Kansas law, farmers can petition county governments to have their land included in an improvement district. This is a public entity empowered to issue tax-free revenue bonds to finance projects like biomethane plants and small-scale sustainable ammonia plants. Those bonds are guaranteed not by taxes or land, but by the revenues of the plants. Second, Kansas geology and Kansas law provide a convenient, simple, and inexpensive method for sequestration of CO2 produced by biomethane or sustainable ammonia plants in the simple expedient of including it within the brine that is used in enhanced oil recovery wells, of which Kansas has some 7,000. Three, the main revenue driver of biomethane plants are renewable identification numbers called RINs, which are issued by the EPA for cellulosic sustainable biofuels that are sold for use as transport fuel. The term transport fuel includes irrigation pumps. And I estimated that of the gas-powered irrigation pumps in Kansas, if all of them was running on RNG, that would provide RINs for 43 plants of the size that I propose to build in Kingman. Fourth, and finally, there is until now only one such district, Kansas Sustainable Agriculture District in Kingman County. However, if there is a concerted effort by the state, that's the point that I'm trying to present you with, if there is a concerted effort by the state to promote and support the propagation of these districts, improvement districts dedicated to these principles, there is the possibility to attract federal funding under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is a one-off opportunity. So the moment is now. The time is here. The announcement just came out from the EPA, and I want to tell you about the structure of the fund. There's $27 billion to be allocated. $7 billion is earmarked for solar projects. They are not relevant. $20 billion is for general and low-income assistance competition. The purpose here is to benefit community-based organizations like the districts. And the idea is that this nonprofit entity, the Kansas Sustainable Agriculture Fund, will collaborate with financing institutions, i.e. bond underwriters, to support to leverage public dollars with private capital to invest in projects that reduce pollution and lower energy costs for families. In this case, we'll be lowering fuel costs for farm families when their vehicles are running on their own RNG. Now, this is particularly to apply to low-income and disadvantaged communities. Now, the question of what exactly a low-income and disadvantaged community is not yet clear. It will become clear when the funding opportunities are announced in the summer of this year. This is a one-off opportunity. There is one shot at this, and it's going to come in the summer of this year. Can you show me the slide now? Now, I want to tell you a little bit about what low-income and disadvantaged community means in the eyes of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So, can you scroll that up a little bit? So, if someone in Washington is sitting and types in Kansas and says, okay, I want to see who are the low-income counties in Kansas. Here's what's ironic. This is the Department of Agriculture we're talking about, and you get this list of counties. Well, there's only one county on that list where the farmers make less money than Kingman, and that is Harper. Meanwhile, on that list, you see some of the richest farmers in Kansas: Haskell, Finney, Stevens, Seward, Grant. It makes no sense at all. I went through the Kansas Department of Agriculture's economic contributions from last year, from 2022, and I found the 43 poorest farmers. You know, the number 43 relates to how many of these we could support with irrigation pumps. The average net farm income of the 43 lowest counties in Kansas was $25,921. If that's not economic disadvantage, I don't know what is. So I would submit to you that if you pass this law, you will give me something to take to those 43, not those counties you see on the USDA list, the 43 counties where the farmers are poor. Let me take this story to their county commissions exactly as I did to the Kingman County Commission. If you empower me to do this, that is what I will do. Now, another point.
Pretty quick. What? You're over 5 minutes, so just keep. You can wrap.
Okay. Well, the other point I want to make, I want to stress I want to make sure that you're clear about this. The EPA expects to make between 2 and 15 grants. $20 billion between 2 and 15 grants. 2 grants for $10 billion or 15 grants for like $1.3 billion. This is not a game for shrinking violets. This is a platform for bold, visionary programs. So if the state of Kansas embraces this program and enthusiastically pursues it, there is some possibility of attracting a lot of money. The structure of the program that I envision is that you would end up money for project development, money for bond costs, and money for bond insurance for all of these districts. And we're talking not small quantities of money, but rather large quantities of money. When the Department of Agriculture tells you, we don't have anyone here who can write this grant, well, they don't have to write the grant. I'll write the grant. I'm a professional writer of patents, very boring documents. I cheerfully volunteer for the task, just for the record. The last thing I want to mention before we close here is, of those 43 counties where the farmers are poor, I was very surprised to find Riley, Douglas, and Sedgwick. It to me is astonishing, all those hundreds of millions of dollars in agricultural research in Riley, and yet their farmers are poor. So if you empower me to do so, I will look forward to appearing in those county commissions and encouraging them to look beyond their normal considerations and support their farmers in order that the rest of the state may benefit.
Questions for Dr. Kasad? Seeing none. Oh, you have a question? Well, maybe we all have the same question. So go ahead, Kyle Hamilton.
All right. Just one moment. So yesterday during the Senate Agriculture Committee, if I remember correctly, you stated that you had kind of put together a prototype improvement district. How long did it take for that improvement district, I guess, to be formed?
2 months.
2 months. Okay, very good. I'm just checking because of the kind of tight timeline with the federal funds.
Well, let me tell you what I did exactly. I appeared before the county commission and I said, look, I want to do this. Are you okay with this? And they said yes. And then I went around and contacted farmers and had public meetings and private meetings and did a lot of footwork. And then we came back with a petition signed by 41 landowners. The county commission was very supportive. Go ahead. And I would say, if you pass this law and I go to those 43 other county commissions, I don't know how many districts I can get formed by the summer. I doubt that I can get 43 formed before the time these grants are announced, but I can get a few formed. There can be more than one district by the time this grant applications are announced.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the fiscal note, it says the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is only authorized through fiscal year 2024. I guess I was just wondering, would you have any problem with if I or someone were to introduce an amendment to the bill to make this bill expire at the end of 2024? Is there any reason why we would need this bill past that point?
Well, if we're successful with the grant, you would need this entity to be ongoing. You know, if you actually succeed in getting a grant to finance the Kansas Sustainable Agriculture Fund, that entity would have to be ongoing. So however you word this, the other thing is there will be other grants. This is not the end of this business. And even so once you get this ball rolling, there will be other grants that can be applied for. So I would think that you might find some language to put a sunset on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is a one-off. The grant off announcements go out this summer, and then that's it. Then that's all there is. The $20 billion is gone as soon as there's the competition, and then it's over. So I think there would be other grants, and it would probably not be a good idea to just close it all down for the reasons I've given.
I guess my issue is with creating a new division. Why does this have to be a new division instead of just being done within an already existing division?
Well, let me just say, this language was drafted before any of this guidance came out from the EPA. I would say, as of right this moment, there is no real reason to do that because of the way this is worded. The main event is the Kansas Sustainable Agriculture Fund, and so in my opinion, if you want to do arrange support for sustainable agriculture districts through the Division of Conservation, well, that's just, a rose by any other name.
Okay. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Up next, Randy Stuckey, Kansas Agribusiness. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Randy Stuckey, and here today on behalf of Kansas Grain and Feed Association and Renew Kansas Biofuels Association. And we do have members that are active in this space today, renewable natural gas. It's essentially a methane capture, and you vent that off for a pure methane that can be sold down to our friends in California. So these projects are ongoing today. I don't see any reason that we shouldn't participate in this Inflation Reduction Act money. As it's been talked about already, it's $27 billion. A portion of that therein would be dedicated to the folks in this space that want to continue and expand their projects in methane capture for renewable natural gas. Good questions about the nuances of the specific bill. I think it was drafted quickly because it had to be drafted quickly. And that's the reality of that we're under. And like we just announced, the EPA rules were just announced yesterday, how the money was going to be divided and such. So this is just a first impression. But if we don't take advantage of it now, we will not be able to take advantage of it later. So we would certainly stand in support of the bill. And one quick change that we would request that currently in Section 1 of the bill, in the definition section, it defines renewable natural gas plant as a facility that converts ag commodities to methane. Well, clearly, if you're talking about a dairy or a swine facility, you're capturing the manure, you're talking about agricultural waste and potentially agricultural byproducts. So, and that's what's being used today. So we would ask that definition be amended to include not just ag commodities, but agricultural waste and agricultural byproducts in the methane process. With that, we'd stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Mr. Stuckey? Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we've already discussed this, and we already have an amendment for that part taken care of, and we will consider some other stuff here with this, with the new developments, and after the EPA.
All right, very good. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here. Up next to Justin Cobb, Nature Conservancy. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Justin Cobb, on behalf of the Nature Conservancy, we are providing neutral testimony in Senate Bill 2091. We are practitioners and promoters of sustainable agriculture, big fans, but in this case, we'd like to provide neutral input here for a couple of reasons. And I want to start with the fundamental definition of what sustainable agriculture is. And to us, that is healthy soil and water conservation, kind of in the basic tenets of agriculture. And those are the things that are going to increase your drought resiliency, decrease your inputs, and stabilize or increase your yields. That's the fundamental things. If the state's going to pursue sustainable agriculture, it has to start there. And sustainable agriculture definitely is a term that means a lot of things to different people, and certainly can include biofuel and other projects. But it would be a little hypocritical if we had sustainable agriculture and we weren't doing some of the basics that apply to almost all producers. And so we think, and there's not just, and that's just not a broader approach to it. There's also broader funds. These funds that are coming down from IRA and IIJA apply to those types of practices. The carbon markets are getting a lot of financial incentives, and that money can land right in the pockets of Kansas farmers. In fact, it's in the KDA budget request was 2 enhancements for grant managers to go after those funds. So I think there's an acknowledgement that those funds exist for all types of practices, and we'd like a broader approach to be considered in this bill. And then also from a feasibility standpoint, standing up a new division is not an insignificant thing. And we talk healthy soil, we talk water conservation, we think of division of conservation immediately within KDA, as well as there are other divisions that work in what is sustainable ag, even though we may not label it as such. So we think that there is some flexibility within the current structure that would be able to facilitate this easier, provide more flexibility in pursuing the funding. As a nonprofit, we've gone after some federal grants before, and the more flexible you can be, the faster you can get those proposals off and increase your chances. We have provided some language to some members of the Senate committee along these lines of ideas. I'd be happy to share that with anybody in this committee that was interested. I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Very good. Questions, Mr. Cobb? Saying none, thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else is a proponent for House Bill 2091? Seeing none. Opponents? Looks like we do have two written proponents. That is Bernard Sheff with Montrose Environmental, and Jack Timish, former legislator, Kingman County Commissioner, and good American boy that. No, but that's what I've heard. No, and serve with John, or whatever. That's Jack, I know. But so anyway, it's getting late, so I'm going to start saying things I shouldn't. You have those in your file as proponents. The opponent is Zach Pastor from Sierra Club, written only. It is in your file as well. Anyone else here to testify as an opponent of this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to neutral, and probably the one that may win the award for staying here the longest is Kelsey Olson, Assistant Secretary for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Ms. Olson, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, committee, for hanging out and hearing this through. So as Chairman Raja said, I'm Kelsey Olson. I serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. You should have a copy of what we've written down. For the sake of time, I will do my best to kind of streamline this. The general idea and the concept is something that the department is supportive of. I would inherently argue with any one of you that almost everything, and I've tried to find examples where it doesn't work, but that everything that we do in the Department of Agriculture is sustainable to some degree, because we believe in this this industry and supporting the longevity of it. So that said, if you want to rename the agency to, Sustainable Department of Agriculture, that would be fine. But I do not believe that it's necessarily critical that we have a separate division called Sustainable Agriculture, because there is catch-alls for lots of different terms, and I think it might be too narrowly defined in this particular bill. Just want to point out, in this bill, we would be charged with creating a nonprofit. That certainly is feasible for a state entity to do. However, it is a bit of a lengthy process. I don't have a great estimate on time of what it will all take, but in my limited research, it's going to take a few months probably. So I'm nervous about being charged with creating this nonprofit and being able then to go after and procure those funds that would be relevant to it within the correct time frame. That does not mean that we're not willing to do so and give it our best effort, but I am hesitant to say that we can with certainty accomplish that task as outlined. With that, I'll stand for questions, and I'm sure I've left some holes somewhere. So,
Representative Slingon-Seepin.
Is there another state-aligned not-for-profit that this could run through? I mean, already exists?
I don't know. At the Department of Ag, we don't have any non-for-profits as described here.
Representative Blex.
Thank you for your testimony. In my experience, and you guys would be the ultimate accountable for the money because of nonprofits, not a state agency. So you would have to do that in the form of a grant, I'm assuming, to them, which kind of to me would complicate the financial end of that. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't know that I've given that a lot of thought as to how that would all flow. We have in the past awarded grants. If we receive money, then we pass it out. And there's certainly reporting requirements and some administrative burden that would go along with that.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the question in all this discussion. If you're getting grants now from the feds, is this something, have you looked into this? Is there something specific that we do have to have this nonprofit in order to draw that money, or because of the structure you have now? And if because structure you have now, do you have the man or the person power, is that correct, to go after more grants, or I'm assuming you have to have this nonprofit, so outside parties. Is that correct?
So I'll take that piece first, because I think that is an important element, and perhaps the revisor can make sure that I'm saying this correctly, but there is an element of the federal funds which have been announced that are allocated to nonprofit entities. So in order to procure, to try to obtain that specific element, it would be required to go through a nonprofit. I think that there's also broad breadth in there, that there's some state entities that would also be eligible, but there is one, I know that there's some funds that are allocated to nonprofits.
Okay.
And maybe Kyle can clarify that better for me.
Kyle?
Well, I haven't read through the new rules yet, and they might go into more detail, because I know that for the first amount of money, the $7 billion, that is explicitly to states, municipalities, and tribal governments, and to eligible nonprofits for low-income and disadvantaged communities. But I thought that I had heard Dr. Kassad say that that was just gonna be for solar power. Okay, but then the other amounts, like the $11,970,000,000, that is just to eligible nonprofits, and so is the $8 billion. And so I would feel like if they wanted it to be able to go to a state and municipality, like with the first amount, they would have expressly listed it. So,
clear as mud, right? I'm not. I kind of need to absorb that to make sure I fully understand. Representative Blex.
Well, I guess I have a little bit of issues of creating a new nonprofit within an existing statutory state agency just for the sake of getting a grant. Because in the grant world, the tribal nations can get a lot of access and a lot of grants that's only to the tribal indigenous. And you know, the other grants are nonprofit NGOs, non-government organizations, but in the most cases, it's you got an administration fee that you siphon off a normal 10% that the grant, whoever gets that grant, takes off of that money. So, and sometimes it can be a little more. But like I say, I have a little bit of concern. This seems to me kind of a flash in the pan that to create a nonprofit within a statutory state agency just for this money. And that, I mean, I guess worse things have happened.
I really don't want to waste anybody's time here, but in the private industry, you know, you want to get more work out of somebody, you give them a new title and a piece of tape that says Vice President White. And is there somebody in the Department of Agriculture that can now be the Department of Nonprofits and Department of Sustainability without adding a new bureaucracy?
Well, thank you for that question. So I would say, like, our fiscal note that we supplied, we did identify that if this were to go forward, we would likely need 2 additional FTEs. We do have a couple very specific grant administrators that exist within the agency. One is for the, we get a FDA grant, which is for local food local food produce, and that's a multi-million-dollar, multi-year grant. And to keep up with all the reports, that person is solely focused on ensuring that those elements are met every month and year. Other grants that we've applied for, I've sometimes written them, and I've tried to write in positions then that we could fund, but we are pretty limited when it would come to terms to be able to add this full-time management onto somebody's existing plate.
So you're not interested in a promotion?
Well, I did write the last grant, and I think we only got it because it was non-competitive, so I don't think I would be great at it.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, other questions? Representative Murphy.
No, thank you, Chair. It just sounds like we need to do a little, maybe quick investigation and see if there's some options. You know, we need to get some more answers for sure.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I would agree. You know, at this point, I don't have a clear understanding if these non-government or nonprofits have to be through a government agency, or if these could be private nonprofit entities to receive this pot of $20 billion. And I'm not clear about who in these federal agencies are going to make the decision about which nonprofits get the money. And so is there any way we can find that out, or can the Kansas Department of Agriculture determine that in any kind of a helpful time frame? Thank you.
I'd be happy to try to dig in a little bit deeper. I don't know the answer off the top of my head of what that appropriate response would be.
I may have some answers.
In the federal language, it defines the word eligible recipient, which in my brief I said eligible nonprofit. And the definition for eligible recipient means a nonprofit organization that is designed to provide capital, leverage private capital, and provide other forms of financial assistance for the rapid deployment of low and zero emission products, technologies, and services. B, does not take deposits other than deposits from repayments and other revenue received from financial assistance provided using grant funds under this section. C, is funded by public or charitable contributions. And D, and so it's all of these, invests in or finances projects alone or in conjunction with other investors. So I think it might be good in general to send this language, the whole regulation, maybe to the committee, and they can look it over.
Okay. Sound good? Okay, very good. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, this Representative Jacobs.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Jacobs.
Sorry to butt in, but what was the title of this bill? Was it called the New Green Deal?
It's called the Love for Jacobs Bill, I believe.
Okay.
No, it is the title of the bill. The explainer was requiring the Secretary of Agriculture to establish a division of sustainable agriculture.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
So yes, so basically establishing a division within the Department of Agriculture. Okay. All right. Thank you, Assistant Secretary. Is there anybody else in neutral position on this bill? Saying none, we close the hearing on House Bill 2091. Again, committee, thank you for your indulgence to stay late. I will give you a break, and we will not meet tomorrow then, since you stayed late. We will meet on Monday. We will meet on Monday at 3:30. If you have thoughts or ideas about the three bills we heard today, let me know. At this time, I am not committing to working any of them. We may not. I need some time to go. There's a lot of information today. I want to go over some things before we decide moving forward. So if you have ideas for passage, or any improvements to these bills, please let me know. I'm here tomorrow for meetings, and you can get a hold of me. So with that, we are adjourned.